Yes. If you're just joining us, the show is Entertainment Friday with me, Emperor Sheka, and we are on the lounge with very important people today. And as I told you guys before, today we are celebrating the International Day of persons living with disabilities. And today we have Dr. Mbugua, Mungai, who is the Directorate of Disabilities in Kenyatta University. And we have my good friend here, Chiira, from Innovate Now. And maybe I've already introduced you guys. Maybe you can just add anything that I haven't said in your introductions. Okay. And maybe you can just start with you, Bernard.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. So I'll tell you a little bit about Innovate Now and what it is. Yeah. So it's an accelerator program that supports innovators and entrepreneurs who are building solutions that are making assistive technology more accessible to persons with disabilities. So we provide them with support so that their products and businesses can go to market.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Maybe another brief introduction from you, Daktari.
My name is Mbugua Mungai. I'm the Director of Disability Services at Kenyatta University. I also teach in the Department of Literature, in the Department of Linguistics, Literature and Foreign Languages.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've been at the Directorate now, this is my 5th year, and getting to enjoy every bit of the innovations that I see coming up in the area of disability services.
Yeah. Okay. This year's theme for International Day of Persons Living with Disabilities is leadership and participation of persons with disabilities towards an inclusive, accessible and sustainable post-COVID-19 world. And maybe I just wanted you guys to weigh in a little bit. Since 1992, when we first celebrated this day to now, how far have we come as a country and as a continent? Bernard.
Okay, thank you. I was thinking about the theme for this year, and I was saying that if this International Day for Persons with Disability was a person, they would be turning 29 years old.
29 years.
So they are pretty much an adult. But when you look at the issues that these days celebrates, I don't think we have even started. I think maybe we are 6 months old, because inclusion is. It's a way of thinking that needs to transform the entire society. Yes. Everyone needs to start understanding what disability is, what inclusion is. So we made some strides, but we still have a long way to go. Looking at our built environment, for example, we are still very inaccessible. As a country, our public transport does not really speak inclusion, and many areas, including healthcare. But we made some strides in education. I think one of the things I can pride myself is that I think in East Africa, I think we have, in the area of education, tried to safeguard the rights of persons with disabilities, although we still have a long way to go there. We've also set, I guess, laws and structures that can enable us to enforce or to be inclusive if the resources to do that are actually put in place. So I think that is what I would say, and maybe Prof can add more.
Yeah. If you look at that theme, there are 3 striking words: leadership, participation, inclusivity. Leadership to me suggests not titles and positions, but taking initiative around issues of disability services. What is it we need to ask other people to see? We are seeing things, can we get other people to see? That to me is leadership, and it doesn't have to come from the top. People with disabilities can offer that leadership because they know best what works for them and what doesn't. Participation. People with disabilities have often been regarded as passive recipients of aid, charity. We do things for them. And the statement here now is people need to be given an opportunity to say things, to do things.
Yes.
That is participation. And then inclusivity means everyone. Yes, leave no one behind, as the saying goes. But then those with disabilities, we need to understand how it is they participate in society, because they have different abilities. They have different challenges. So do we shift things here and there to enable those people to participate? That is the meaning of inclusion, and which is why the term innovation matters. Yeah. We think broadly for everybody, universal design, but then we also think about the specificities, the unique, peculiar circumstances of each individual with a disability, and ask, what is it we can do to allow individual X to function? Yeah. That to me is the meaning of inclusivity. And then post-COVID, we have heard the saying, build back better.
Yes.
There is no greater opportunity than we have now to make things right, because COVID taught us many things. For example, if you're thinking about the way we have asked people to work from home,
yeah.
How is it that people with disabilities can work from home? For instance, if they have a visual impairment, what is it that we need to shift in the technology to enable them to work? We could give other examples, but in a nutshell, we are saying this is now an opportunity to reshape the way things are done, to bring along everybody, so that we don't keep redesigning general frameworks every time we have a challenge, but we can begin to think innovatively in a way that brings people's full participation on board.
Okay, thank you very much. The world has almost a population of 70 billion, and out of that, 7 billion, and out of that, 15% are people living with disabilities. And 80% of those come from developing countries. And I just wanted to know, as a country, how far are we in terms of inclusivity? What percentage can we give ourselves, maybe as Kenya and Africa in general? Or maybe just even a developed economy like the US, how far have they gone in terms of inclusivity, Dr. Ari?
It's a good question, very valid. Of course, one would need to think about the specific parameters that we are using to make this assessment. But I would say in Kenya we are at about 5 to 8%. We have fantastic laws. We have fantastic thinking about this question of disability, but we have not quite begun to scratch the core of the issues. Yes, we are doing a lot of awareness campaigns. We have a lot of those going. Even government is doing well. But then there are broader issues beyond the issue of awareness.
Yes.
So we have begun the conversation. That is something I can credit Kenya as a country for. The conversation is quite robust. We never get quite there. We have this habit where people keep saying we are not doing this because we don't have resources. But then I've been saying there are things we need to do that do not even cost you resources. Think about the disability accommodations we always talk about. For example, if you reorganized someone's work schedule so that they work later hours because their body functions do not work very well, very early in the morning. Yes. Maybe somebody has a medical condition that led to their disability and the cold affects their bones. What does it cost you if you are an employer to allow this person to work from 10 to 7 p.m. with a break in between?
Okay.
That does not cost you anything. They are deliverables. Deliver this and we are good to go. Okay. So the question of resource allocation vis-a-vis provision of disability services, to me, is often a cop-out when people don't want to do the right thing, either because they don't understand, or because it's not a priority, or simply because they don't care. And we have many situations when things happen like that. For example, if a high school principal in Kenya today turns away a student with a disability, and that has happened in the past anyway, they are documented cases. What that is telling me is that we have people who go to school but who actually do not understand what all of these things we've been saying in our awareness drives about disability and the need to give people with disabilities opportunities, what those things mean. I have seen very proactive principals who, once a student lands in their school, they are on a wheelchair, they immediately say, aha, can we do accommodations A, B, C, D to get this student to learn? Yeah. There's principles like that. So what accounts for the fact that some principals accept this practice, others don't? Yeah. And you see, I'm talking about school principals and headmasters and headmistresses because they are placed at the very core of a formative process where we are shaping generations and generations that are going to come and work in this society around these same questions. So if they don't offer leadership in those areas, we can keep here talking about lack of resources, lack of adequate budgets, but you can have budgets and have people who will not implement certain actions that those budgets allow them to.
Okay, maybe just over to you, Bernard. Let's talk about inclusivity in terms of leadership and participation of the youth. What more can be done, or what is being done, according to your knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, so of course, youth is at the center of any conversation in Africa because we are a very young continent. So I think in the context of disability. So we've seen, yesterday I attended the first rehabilitation conference in Kenya, and there was a young lady, I think she was 21 years old, who was called to give her experience with disability. And you could see that the level of knowledge and insights she had, that she deserves to be sitting somewhere on an advisory board of a government or a donor, because a lot of what happens is that when many initiatives are crafted, let's fund this, let's fund that, nobody talks to young people and involve them in the planning of this. So I think we've made some strides in Kenya, but still very far to go. And I think when you start looking at things from leadership is a diverse topic, because we have politics, we have corporate leadership, we have many forms of leadership. So what we've seen with persons with disabilities is that naturally you are actually conditioned to be a leader, because leadership is about problem solving. And for us, many times we have to solve our own problems because we don't find solutions. So my experience that most persons with disabilities that have come across that have been empowered with access to education and that have reached a point where they can offer their leadership, when they are given that chance, they excel. And I think I'll talk about myself because, well, I just crossed the youth bracket last month, according to the law. So I am 36, but I have been in leadership since I was in campus. And it had nothing to do with because of the disability. Leadership is about solving issues. So I think when it comes to this topic of participation and inclusion, as we're celebrating this year's International Day of Disabilities, we need to ask ourselves, in matters disability, where are the youth? At the national level, at the county level, even in corporate. I've seen what corporate is doing. Is doing a good job where they're using youth as ambassadors for some of their initiatives. And I think we need to follow suit as government so that we can actually hear the voice of persons with disabilities.
Okay, I'm getting feedback here from online. Of course, we are live on Facebook on our page, KUTV Kenya. And Toto Amariam is saying, Mr. Wasike, this is a very great conversation. Often the society ukosea sana by pitting or sympathizing with people living with disabilities. What they need is empathy. Put yourself in their shoes and assist them to do it for themselves. And I don't know how further we can take this conversation in terms of when you see a person with disabilities, what's the best thing you can do? Because most people find themselves not being able to know what to do when maybe they interact with people with disabilities. Others feel they should empathize, others feel they should sympathize, others feel they should pity. Maybe just a general direction from both of you, so that that's also part of inclusivity. How you behave around people with disabilities. Daktari.
Yes, that touches on the question of disability etiquette. How do you, for example, interact with a person who has total blindness? How do you guide them? How do you, for instance, place their food on the table? You realize, for instance, when you go to hotels and bars, because people with visual impairment also go to bars, the waiter will come, or the waitress will come and place a drink or food right there and go away. This person cannot see. How are they supposed to know that there is food there if you don't tell them that there is a plate right in front of you where you've placed your hand, and to the left you have a glass, to the right you have the fork. You have a napkin placed at this or that position. These are the basic common sense issues that we need to create conversations about, because it makes socialization and interaction very difficult for people with disabilities. There's a cardinal rule: do not assume that a person with a disability needs this. Ask them
what they need.
Ask them what they need, and they'll be happy to tell you, no thank you, I don't need assistance because I can cross the street. I have seen blind people on their white canes crossing the street, even in KU, taking matatus to Roiro. Do not assume that this person is in need of something. Often, we fail to pay attention to the issue of independence. All of us want to be independent. Nobody wants to be forever dependent on the assistance of other people. So that is something that is going to require us to respect. People need to be taken as valuable members of society with their own autonomy to make certain judgments and decisions. These blind people, or people with walking on crutches or on wheelchairs, they are fathers, they are brothers. At home, they make decisions about the people in their houses. They go to work, they earn money, they come and spend that money on their families. These are intelligent people. So do not assume that anyone is half intelligent because they have this or that disability. No, that is no indicator in any way about their capacities. Think about the way we treat people with disabilities in banking halls. I once went with a friend who was denied an ATM card in a bank, which I will not name. They said, how are you going to operate your account? Your money will be stolen. This person told them, but with due respect, if I was intelligent enough to earn the money, I'm intelligent enough to safeguard it. So these are the kind of negative attitudes and that stigmatize people even further and separate them from the rest of society. There's the golden rule: if you don't know how to interact with a person with a disability, ask them how they would want to. There's one common sense thing that I always insist on. As a rule, don't keep the floors wet. Anybody can trip. Most of people walking on crutches, but even people without disability can slip on those tiles and injure themselves. This is common sense. So keep the floors dry. When you go to the washroom, don't leave droplets on the floor. Use the hand towel. Use the air dryer, hot air dryer. These are some of the basic things which, if people actually give a thought to, we wouldn't be having too many difficulties and resentment coming from people with disabilities when you do certain things, because they actually feel that they are not being considered, or others are not being considerate, and hence their behavior, which in many ways can be considered patronizing. These are not children. They are grown-ups. They are equal partners in society. Give them that courtesy and allow them to make choices.
Over to you. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about that. Daktari has been so detailed.
So I'll keep it simple. For me, I'll take it from the angle of education. Because the question is, why is it that we have this situation where there are members of society who do not know how to interact with persons with disabilities? It's because our education system does not teach inclusion. And this is something we need to interrogate, and right from kindergarten. it should be taught. It should be part of our education system. Number two, education is also a personal responsibility. Just because it is not taught does not mean you should not know, because you have internet. Everyone has internet today on their phone. Literally everything you need to learn about disability inclusion is on the internet. So I would encourage people, take that personal responsibility. There is no excuse in this day and age for you not to know something if you really want to know it. And the third thing I'll say is about empathy. You mentioned empathy. One of the things we do at Innovate now, which, as I mentioned, is a program that supports innovation for assistive technologies, is that we actually bring our entrepreneurs who do not necessarily have disabilities in close proximity with persons with disabilities. So whatever they design, whatever they produce, has to be tested and get feedback from persons with disabilities. The reason this is important is because that is what empathy is about. It's about not assuming things, but speaking to people who you are concerned about. Yeah.
No, very nice. Yes, sir.
Latching on to something Bernard said about the education system we have, people are now writing books for the CBC curriculum, right?
Yeah.
When they draw images, when they involve characters in the storytelling, how many of those characters have disabilities?
Okay.
This is a good opportunity to teach kids to learn that there are people who are different in society, but who also function in the same, along the same goals. Yeah. So we can creatively put this into our learning tools without requiring $1 billion to do so. It's so simple. In newspapers, what stories do people tell about disability? When it's very wrong when I see in a newspaper, I won't name any, a story about disability told from the angle of sympathy.
Yeah, most of the stories are about
sympathy. And this is wrong. You're telling us, oh, this guy crawls from point A to point B. That is the gist of the story. But you're not telling us what has this guy achieved after crawling from point A to B, and how does that contribute to society? That should be the story.
Or maybe just talk about Bernard here with Innovate Now.
Yes.
That is more important than just crawling.
Yes.
Now, talking about crawling, maybe I just wanted to know something. There's this story of people with disabilities being paraded maybe in towns and cities by people to help them to beg. And I don't know, is there anything that can be done about that? Because I saw a story on YouTube from some TV station saying that one is some part of business where people hire people with disabilities and then just use them to beg from people on the streets. Is there anything that can be done about it to curb that? Because I feel it's wrong.
Maybe let me talk about that, because I did come across such a story, and we see it all the time, yeah. And there's a day I actually interrogated this. I was at City Market. Okay. I was busy buying my meat. Then some small kids come and they had physical disabilities. They were crawling in the market, and then of course they wanted money. And but before I gave them money, I started talking to them. I asked them, where do you live?
Who's brought you here?
Yeah. And when you interrogate them, we actually realized, first of all, they were not even Kenyans. They were from a neighboring country.
Okay.
And then I got interested in that topic, and I dug deeper, and I realized there's actually what you mentioned, which is, for me, is actually human trafficking. If you think about it, this is not even a matter of purely disability. It's a matter of how safe are our borders, what policies do we have in our cities, and when we see that happening, do the authorities even care to know why are these persons begging?
Yeah.
So we have to, one of the things I say is that when you're talking about disability matters, they are not a separate issue that needs to be dealt with by, say, one ministry. The entire government needs to work together. The Ministry of Interior, for example, if it's a human trafficking issue, they should be involved and actually stop it. But the whole idea also is that the image it casts about disability. Of course, everyone now thinks, and this is the image that has been planted in our minds for a very long time. I'll tell you a very interesting personal story. The time I went somewhere, and someone wanted to give me money.
Hey.
Yeah, they just came and they wanted to give me money, and I was like, why do you want to give me money? So they already assume, by virtue of this person having a disability, the best you can do
is give
them money. And you see, that's of course an assumption. I don't need their money. I could probably pay them.
Yeah.
But you see, it's something that society needs to change. We are talking about this year. We are talking about taking stock and building better, and trying to see what can we do to ensure that the mindset shift happens. Yeah. And the way you want to do that is we need to focus on different stories of persons with disabilities and ask ourselves, how did these people get here if they're successful, for example? Because there is a lot that goes into making someone like me. And that needs to be interrogated and enhanced so that it can happen across board.
So that you can just change that perception.
Yes, and I hope we can also talk about assistive technology, because it's very important, and that's why Innovate now exists. Yes.
I think maybe you can just talk about that quickly before I just get to Daktari to also tell us about how we can change that perception.
Okay.
If there are policies in place that can be put to just help change that.
Okay, fantastic. So when you think about assistive technology, first of all, it is technology, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I'd love us to think about, why do we use technology? Why does technology exist? It's basically an enabler.
Yeah.
So when you talk about assistive technology, we are talking about products, we're talking about services, and even systems that make it possible for anyone who has an impairment, not just persons with disability, even older people, because older people have because of age, you realize now you can't run up the stairs as you used to, or you can't. So the idea about assistive technology is to enhance function and independence. So Innovate Now, and I'll tell you a little bit about the history. In 2018, for the first time ever, there was a Global Disability Summit.
Okay.
And it was actually organized by the Kenyan government in conjunction with the UK government. And it was the biggest conference in recent times to ask hard questions about disability and development. Out of that conference, some commitments were made by government, public sector, private sector, on what can we do different to ensure that we are actually changing the tide. Yeah. Because the thing is, right now we are talking of 1 billion people with one or more forms of a disability. By 2050, this number will have doubled to 2 billion.
2 billion, yeah.
If we don't change the way we are doing things. So out of that conference, one of the initiatives that came out is a project called 80-2030, or Assistive Technology 2030, and it's led by the Global Disability Innovation Hub. This is an organization, it works globally, and here in Kenya, we are partnering with AMREF to run Innovate Now. It's part of that 80-2030. But the whole idea is to say, let us really check what are the barriers, what are the, say, top 10 barriers for persons with disabilities. Yeah. So there was a study done, and there's a publication on this, that placed the lack of access to assistive technology as one of the top 10 barriers. Actually, it's top 3, maybe number 1.
Okay.
Because you see, assistive technology is a first step someone who has a disability can take to actually to participate equally. Because for me, without my crutches, I couldn't have come here. And this is a basic function. It's a basic. So there's an idea about access. How many can access this? So when we looked at what are the factors that hinder this access, we realized that in most developing countries, assistive technologies are very expensive.
Okay.
Why? We looked at why is this? One, we import most of our assistive, maybe 90% is imported. Meaning we don't have a local industry for producing assistive products. And that's a major problem. And COVID actually showed us how serious this can be when borders are closed.
Yeah.
Right? So then the other issue is about quality. I mean, we do have people who fabricate locally things, but are they following a quality standard? Are they making sure that the user that this product will not harm the user.
Yeah.
Because sometimes what assistive technology does, it can do more harm than good.
Yeah.
You have charities that come, they buy wheelchairs, maybe donated or bought from somewhere, and they donate them, and nobody has checked, will this wheelchair work for this child or this adult? So we said we need to catalyze local innovation for assistive technology. And so together with AMREF Health Africa, we launched Innovate Now in 2019. Actually, we actually launched the first group of people to be supported on the 3rd of December in 2019. So this is our 3rd anniversary. And what we do is we say, okay, how do we start solving these issues of quality, affordability, and access? So we said, let's look at how human beings create new solutions, because that is what innovation is about. When people thought that Kenyans cannot be banked, if you go like 15, 20 years ago, there are many banks but the number of people who had a bank account, maybe it was 2% or something.
Yeah.
And they assumed that these people, they are in the rural areas, they cannot afford a bank account. But then what happened? Mobile money came and disrupted all banks and put a bank in everyone's pocket. In a situation where people had said, no banking business here.
Can work.
It's the same thinking about disability and assistive technology. So what we are trying to do is to work with innovators or people who think different, because these are the people that bring solutions. And we are supporting them. Like now we've supported 22 of them since 2019. And a lot of them are building assistive products that are made and built for our environment, meeting the highest standards of quality. And we are actually creating this industry from the ground up. So Innovate Now exists to promote innovation for assistive technology, to increase access for affordable assistive products. And also what we want to show is that this can be a sustainable area of business. That's why our program is not, it's not an NGO. We don't support NGOs. We support startups. Because we want them to create sustainable ways of making these products available for a very long time. So these are the ones that are going to build industries for all the assistive products you can think of in this country. And we have a call coming up in January, and I encourage anyone who has been developing a solution for assistive products to actually register when we place our call for applications.
Wow, thank you. Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And maybe just to finish up, Dr. maybe you can just touch a little bit on innovation, on the perception that we talked about, and maybe any products that your department has received of late that can help people with disabilities in Kenyatta University.
Yeah, that question of perception is important. Look at it this way, in regard to the beggars. There are laws that say it is wrong to exploit children for their labor. What those beggars are being made to do is to work for other people. That's exploitation. What makes that okay, and what makes it different from exploiting children or exploiting people, people who are older and not paying them? There are laws that exist to do that. And I think there has been a tendency by various stakeholders in county and national governments to just look at that issue of beggars and say, okay, there's a way in which these people are being helped, to cope. But then you see it is wrong. It is abusive. It is not helpful to these people in any way. If it was, they would have left those street corners.
After some time.
Yes, as soon as they acquired their first 1 million shillings. That is not the case. So it tells you that that is a placement in an area of illegality that government ought to look critically into. I mean, when we have visitors coming to Nairobi, we have the county government cleaning up the streets and treating these beggars as dirt, and taking them off to any number of places. My challenge would be, can we find out why people end up in the streets begging?
Begging, yeah.
Those people with disabilities. If we work on those factors, perhaps we will have fewer people getting on the streets. Then let us criminalize this behavior. In I think in Uganda it was last year, where giving money to street beggars was criminalized. Yes, and a law was passed. And if you were seen donating to, giving alms to a beggar, then they would, yes. And I think, drastic as it is a way of getting society to begin thinking very, very hard and carefully about that question, which we have ignored here. Bernard said something interesting. Look, if 10 of us were seated in a room for Harambe, Bernard came in his Prado, I drove in my small Toyota, and we are having this collection. Chances are people will not expect Bernard and I to contribute to the collection. Reason? Those guys should be being assisted.
Yeah, they need assistance.
They those perceptions persist on streets, in workplaces, in all manner of spaces, and the challenge is for people who are placed in situations where they can do something in each of those spaces, to actually get people to understand that whatever cultural and traditional reasons get you thinking about disability in this way are addressed. At the workplace, I have seen colleagues with disabilities not given an opportunity to contribute to an academic discussion because they have a disability. This guy has a PhD. It's not his eyes or his ears or his legs that we are interested in, it is his brain. So if that happens in academic context, then you can imagine how bad the situation is down there. So there's a lot of work to be done in terms of creating awareness to shift the perceptions all the way from the grassroots to the highest levels that we can imagine. Then the question of innovations. One of the things that we have been exploring recently at the Directorate of Disability Services here is a partnership we are having with the Kilimanjaro Blind Trust Africa, where we are using orbit readers to try and see how they can be used to improve learning for students with visual impairment who have been using Braille. So right now we are beginning a baseline survey to see what it is their performance is like, so that we can compare that at the end of the academic year to see how the orbit reader has improved or not improved their grades. And then we can make an argument and say, based on these findings, the orbit reader does A, B, C, D. My hunch is this thing is going to get them to a better place. It is possible for them to get their lecturers to read their exams, print them from this gadget without having to take them to the Braille resource room at the Directorate of Student Affairs. They can look for information on their own through the internet using this gadget. They can communicate with each other. They can communicate with phones. So this thing, this Orbit Reader 20 makes it better to perform beyond the Braille. So we want to see how students are going to get there. And then in the area of innovations, we have been having this discussion for a long time. And the question I always ask people is, why is it that service provision for people with disabilities is not treated as an industry, a legitimate industry? The last time I checked, I think about January last year, in the West alone, there was $36 billion up for grabs for investment in this area. Nobody was taking up the money. The money exists. See innovating for disability as a business challenge. That challenge is going to create a product for an end user, because we insist that people with disabilities be involved right from the word go at the design stage. Because they are end users, they know what works and what doesn't work. And then take that all the way to the point where it is a business that can sustain itself and create employment, bring other businesses on board. Businesses do mentor businesses. And that is the way we are going to create an elaborate value chain and make things for ourselves. We don't always have to have things coming from abroad which don't work for us anyway.
Thank you. Maybe just last words. We've talked a lot about it. Very important information has been passed. Maybe just a few last words before we finish the interview.
Yeah.
Bernard?
So I think, so for me, two things. One is, if we want to change how society thinks about disability, we need a new narrative and we need new content. And one thing I can say is that technology, media, and the internet in this age, they are an equalizer. You know, I don't know whether you've seen new industries that are being built on the internet. So really, there is no excuse about changing mindset. If someone can go on social media, they can learn about disability inclusion. Yeah. Number two, technology has the potential to create new possibilities for persons with disabilities, and that is why programs like Innovate Now exist. Actually, Professor here summed up really well. We are not only trying to make assistive technologies possible, we are creating new industries, we are creating jobs while addressing matters of disabilities. So for me, I would encourage anyone who is in this country and wants to explore an area that has not been explored. 1 billion people is a huge market if you are thinking about it globally, right? So just ask yourself, what can you do to bring solutions in this area? And at Innovate Now, we are there to support you with access to education, mentorship, and even funding for your business.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kenyatta University is an institution that prides itself in being or striving at being an inclusive environment. That is a challenge I would throw to all other sectors of society. Let us do our bit to try and see how we can build inclusivity into all the processes of our lives, political, social, economic. There's a friend of mine who tells this beautiful story. I will summarize it in less than a minute. He was at Kenyatta University. He did not have a disability. He lived in room 5. In room 4 lived a student with albinism. In room 6 lived a blind student. And this guy in the middle here, in room 5, never quite understood how these people's lives worked. They looked very strange and distant to him. Fast forward, he left KU. Many years later, he had a road accident. He's now paraplegic. He occupied room 5. He's the 5th person.
Okay.
Albinism, physical disability, and now blindness. So he completed the set. My point is, we need to be prepared for that point in life when we shall be the occupants of room 5. Because we shall age anyway. Even if you don't have a disability, you will age. Your hips will give you trouble. You need to think about what's going to happen when you get to room 5 in year 80 of your life. That's not the time you are going to begin thinking about disability. Begin thinking about it now, in the sense that we have parents, we have sisters, we have brothers, we have children who have needs and who occupy room 4 and 5. And who probably will occupy the other vacant room in terms of disability at some point in life. So I don't tell this story to scare anyone off, but just to jolt them to the realities of life. Disability is a natural fact of life, whether one likes it or not. So we need to be able to think about not just ourselves, how we live, but also how others with disabilities live. Because it is the way we handle that difference that's going to tell society whether we are truly inclusive or we are just pretending to be inclusive.
Thank you. Yeah, today we mark the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And from the conversation here you've had, let us be more inclusive. Don't sympathize, empathize. And if you don't know how to interact with people with this disability, ask them. We are going for a short break. We'll be back on the launch with Lailin.